All right, we are live for the Friday edition of the Mike and Mario Show. It's been a week or so since we've had a chance to collaborate, but as always, Mario, it's good to connect with you. And what an interesting week to say the least. But before we dive into the details, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Mike, and you?
I'm doing good, man. Just very interesting times that we live in, and lots of weird things happening all at the same time. Wow, the markets are like right now. Currently, I'm looking at the U.S. equities. We're in the green, but yet jobs expectations overshot expectations, and precious metals prices, you name it. But anyway, I guess how do you want to start this particular live stream? What do you want to kick it off with, my friend?
I guess we could talk about what happened in Japan today.
Okay.
Because I spoke about it this morning in my video, and there's a lot of speculation. Was the former Prime Minister Abe a good guy or a bad guy? Yeah. Some people are saying he was against the World Economic Forum, but I'm not sure. One thing that I think is significant is that he was the guy who implemented this policy that we adopted in March 2020 of massive QE and massive fiscal stimulus. He adopted that in Japan in April 2013 after he was elected in December 2012, and it was called Abenomics. So I just think it's symbolic that, and I don't know what the gripe that the guy who shot him had with him. It's still early days, but I just think it's interesting. And the other thing that happened a couple of days ago was the Georgia Guidestones, right?
Right.
That those stones that call for that it's supposed to guide the world in good principles, but one of the principles is to get the world population to 500 million. And someone tweeted out, it's interesting that July 6th was George W. Bush's birthday as well, his 76th birthday, and it happened on 7/6 as well. For people who like numerology and numbers, that sounds interesting. Who knows? Some people think, oh, we spoke about this before we came on air. People talking about the good guys and bad guys, but it doesn't matter. Or I think in the end of the day, what happens to the currencies is what matters, and you need to be on the right side of it. Right. That's why you have to keep stacking, despite the fact that we're seeing the paper prices of gold and silver get trampled upon. But not just gold and silver, commodities are coming off as well. And I think that's part of the Fed trying to moderate what they call inflation or CPI.
Right. Man, that was a mouthful right there, man. You cover a lot of subject. You cover a lot of topics. And that's the thing where it's so confusing for me. Like I talked about all these events throughout the week, but yet at this current moment, of course, we've always known nothing makes sense. But it just seems like things are unraveling from all different fronts, from the political sphere. And of course, we have Boris Johnson in your area, so I definitely want to touch on that.
Yeah, that's another guy who's bitten the dust.
Right. So between this Abe situation, like as you mentioned, we can read into it or we just take it for what it is. Unfortunately, it's another life lost. But then again, I think that's just one of many different shakeouts that we're going to experience all at the same time, trying to divert us. Like, distractions and diversion tactics is what is at play now, because it's a psychological psyop game right now. And they're trying their best to keep us focused on all types of things and to create a narrative of their ability to maintain things. But I really believe there's such an uprising right now amongst the people, especially with the farmers, because, I saw an article literally a couple minutes ago of the West trying to spin it, saying that fact checking, that video footage you're seeing is from 2019 over, it was something like that. I'm thinking so they're trying to create and maintain the narrative, but they're losing it. But anyway, but at the end of the day, this is all about the transition out of the old into the new. And of course, it's all based upon debt and the inability to sustain it. We're witnessing it unravel in real time. So give me your thoughts on Boris. Let's touch on Boris, because that definitely caught me by surprise, because people are saying that, maybe Biden's next. But what are your thoughts on Boris out and who's going to replace him? This is going to be a major distraction in the UK, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, someone just put a message on our board that Rishi Sunak, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he's just put his name forward for the leadership contest, and there's a few other ones that are probably going to be running.
Yeah.
Boris, the public for public consumption, we're told, of course, that he's a liar. He 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 had those parties during lockdowns,
Yeah.
and he also employed an MP that had abused someone like sexually, and he didn't think it was a bad idea to make him a junior minister or something. And we're told now that everyone's fed up. His cabinet members and everyone resigned.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's all for public consumption. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe he also, I saw a tweet, someone saying that he said that we'd never have lockdowns again. So they had to get rid of him, the people at the World Economic Forum, so that we could have someone that would be willing to do a lockdown. So yeah, you got Rishi Sunak there in the middle. He's running. He's come out and said officially he's running. The guy on the far right with the green tie, he's a guy called Ben Wallace. I think he's the defense guy. And someone that is in contact with me, who seems to know a few things, thinks that guy is going to be the next prime minister. And I've really almost never heard of him, but you look at his background, he's worked in the military. He's worked for a big military technology company.
So he's involved in the system. That's the thing. Like, whoever, I don't know anything about UK like that, but whoever these people are here, to my
and it's not going to
in on it.
It's not going to change anything. I think it's just a change of, they took. It's like, let's say it's a football team or a soccer team, and you've got David Beckham. He's the captain, number 10. He's playing well, but then the manager says, "Oh, we're going to take him off the field. We're going to put someone else." But the team's still the same.
Right.
So
owners are still the same.
Yeah.
Agenda is still the same. They want to win.
And maybe you could show the viewers that a screenshot I sent you about Bill Gates.
Okay, let me put this on the screen here. Yeah, so this is so it looks like Bill Gates is, as you mentioned, on his way to the UK, or just touched down in the UK.
That was a friend of mine sent me this on a WhatsApp chat that we have, and apparently this is Bill Gates' jet, and it arrived in the UK on the 6th of July at 21:04. And the guy who sent me said, "Is he come to the UK to pick the new prime minister?" Who knows? He could have come to the UK to watch the Wimbledon final on Sunday. But
right, okay. Take into that what you want, but if there is a natural shakeout happening right now of more people being able to have their say so in how things are unraveling with the cabinet. If a lot of Boris Johnson's cabinets resigned intentionally, putting pressure on him, he then left. Now we got more people coming in. Now they got to replace. So now they got to congregate and come up with how, what, where, when. If it's a matter of that, or this could always be just a distraction, and they're literally taking us for another damn trip around the world. But anyway, let's keep moving, man. Let's get into what is also making headways, and that happens to be the farmer situation we touched on briefly. But there's more videos surfacing on tractors. We got Poland, we got Italy, we got Germany, and looks like farmers are under a lot of pressure. Therefore, I'm seeing videos of empty store shelves because produce is not reaching the shelves. So this is definitely is this something that they meaning orchestrators of this whole experience, something they can continue to try to cover up, or will they be forced to exit the building as far as their positions of power because of stuff like this? Will people rise up faster, you think, with this stuff spreading?
Well, we had the truckers in Canada, didn't we? And they try to cover that up as much as possible. They weren't able to, but the same guys are still in power in Canada.
Right.
So, but the Dutch farmers, I think they are the minister who passed this new regulation about nitrogen emissions. His brother owns like a chain of these
Grocery
stores.
store. Yeah. I
Yeah,
saw that.
and that in which Bill Gates invested $600 million. So it, I think, like you said earlier, they might want people to get really angry because then they have an excuse to crack down on people. That's the
Right.
other danger as well. People get angry. We saw these farmers; they're spraying manure at government buildings and
Yeah.
politicians' houses. But and I've seen clips of the Dutch police. They're very violent and shooting at tractors and stuff.
Right. I
And it
heard.
seems to be spreading, like the little clip you showed there earlier. That was in Italy, the farmers getting angry. And I think it's going to get worse because natural gas prices are going to keep going up. Energy prices are going to keep going up. And once the Fed, in my opinion, pivots, commodities are going to go back up. And like
Right.
you were saying, maybe you want to talk about what you think we're going to see, a hyper stagflation.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I was just commenting on based upon the current trajectory of the overall global economy. And so we tend to focus on certain sections. Like here, I focus on the US heavily because that's where I'm based at. You pay attention on US, UK, and Europe because you're well versed in all those regions. And so this is a globally coordinated event, and the goal is to minimize access of real world goods into people's hands. So they automatically use a supply bottleneck situation to limit resources for us, which causes the price to go up on top of all the monetary issues we have. So what I was talking about was the interview you did with Rafi talking about the currency situation and how there's not enough currency to best definitely meet debt obligations and things of that nature. And so there's going to be a correction in the overly inflated asset bubbles as the housing market, stock market, all those things start to trickle downward because you need more currency to keep them things inflated. But then all along, when it comes to everything we need on a day-to-day basis, such as food, water, energy, and everything else, the demand will be higher than ever, but yet the cost as well. Therefore, we're going to have asset prices going up on the things we need, and all the overly priced assets that are being as are viewed as net worth and assets for our portfolios rather, going to be trending downward. So that's that hyper stagflation where it's going to accelerate mighty quickly in the days ahead, in my opinion. So, and then you said also that as a result of all that stuff intensifying, you see the Fed pivoting a lot sooner, or possibly September-ish is the time frame. But then again, we got this a meeting coming up soon where they're anticipated to also rate hikes, whether it's half a point, quarter, 3/4, or what. Will they stick with that 3/4, or will they dial it back, or what? Because they're hiking. They know what they're doing. They're not fools. But what are they trying to accomplish with this?
I guess the next meeting is the 24th, 25th. And I think also the preliminary advanced second quarter GDP is coming out on the 28th. And I think they'll probably know that number. And from now until the next Fed meeting, there will be more economic data. And if they're really weak, they might do 50. But right now, I think they're on track, like it says there, to do 3/4. But I also think they could be doing, because the way they look at it, and it's a Keynesian, mentality. They think that they call it a strong economy creates inflation, but it's not a strong economy. It's a credit bubble where people are borrowing too much and spending too much and not producing enough. That creates inflation. So, yeah, I think the economy is in a recession, and what I think they're trying to rein in is not the economy; it's the credit bubble, and that's going to hurt, financial assets, like you said. But there's going to come a point where if they don't pivot, then the economy could become even worse. Even though you have people like the press secretary in the White House.
Yeah.
She said recently that this is the best economy ever in history. And also Joe Biden today said that they've created there's more private sector jobs now in the US than ever before, and than even under Trump. And you kind of wonder, he's the guy who actually plagiarized the speech from a British uh, politician called Neil Kinnock.
Uh-huh.
Can you trust what he tells us?
Right. I've seen some skits or some memes of a lot of plagiarized speeches from the most recent politicians. It's like, wow, like the script writers is throwing them under the bus because clearly people are gonna research that. But then again, it gets swept under the rug. Here's that what you call it, the GDP now, real GDP estimate for Q2, and literally once again we're it's recessionary indicators right there. We're negative. But then again, we have people saying, I still don't see recession just yet because, the jobs numbers, people are going back to work. And I'm like, oh, but overall though, like, look beyond just those fake numbers that we're being given. Overall, things have been trending downward for quite some time. And that's just within our own country. But then I was also want to point out the 30-year mortgage, 30-year interest rates is 5.3. So my question for you is, at this current rate, with this trending downward, how, do you see this going much lower, and how does this reflect when it comes to the overall bond market itself?
Well, the benchmark interest rate, 30-year rate, is the U.S. Treasury,
Mm-hmm.
and the U.S. the 30 years actually going back up. So you might wake up on Monday and that 30-year could be back up to 5.5. So it moves around, with the market.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking here. The 30-year yield, it hit a bottom of 3.1 yesterday, and now it's already at 3.27. So it's up about 15 basis points. Yeah, that's going to keep hurting consumers. The fact, because a lot of people have to pay, service their mortgage, and if they were paying 3% at the beginning of the year, now they're having to pay 5 or 6. That's going to put a dent on their discretionary spending. And I also I think there is a survey, the University of Michigan survey, consumer sentiment. They ask a question about housing. They think it's it's not a good time to buy a house. The consumer, and we've had house prices go through the roof, not just in the U.S. but in the U.K.
Right.
And I think everything's gonna slow down. But maybe they want to. Might pivot in October, September, just before November, so that they can give the economy a little boost before the election.
Yeah, we will see, man. It's going to be very interesting, but let's keep moving along. Let me get to. I got a lot more stories here. Let's talk about the trade. Well, I call it the trade weighted dollar index. Because it's it's the focal point and the benchmark for how, I guess, the global economy prices everything. But yet it's 107 as of right now. And then, of course, the milkshake theory, Boris Johnson, a lot of people are giving him props, saying that that whole melt up situation with the Dixie is in play, and it's still got a lot more room to go higher. But then again, at the end of the day, when it comes to putting more purchasing power in our pocket or things that really matter on the ground, it doesn't really mess with us, ultimately. But what are your thoughts on this? I know you covered it earlier, but
yeah, I've covered this topic many times over the years. That the dollar index is a measure against other crappy fiat currencies, and the dollar is the best of a bad bunch. So this is actually not. I think this is a bad sign that the dollar is going up like this. Eventually, the dollar is going to turn south as well.
Yeah.
Because these fiat currencies take turn. It was devised in 1973 when the Western world went on a floating exchange rate system. Because prior to that, under Bretton Woods, exchange rates were fixed. Just like weights and measures. Because and can you imagine changing the inch and the yard and the pound every second? Though it would be crazy, and that's what we have with money. and
Yeah.
that's why they needed the dollar index. That's why I don't really put much importance on the dollar index, because in 1973, when they started counting it,
Yeah.
gold was under $100, and it started at 100. We're now at 107,
Yeah.
but gold is like over 1,700. So is it really a safe place to be, the dollar? The other thing you're doing by holding Federal Reserve notes or the fiat dollar is you're financing the U.S. government, and I think a lot of people are unhappy with the U.S. government, just like I'm unhappy with the UK government. So why would I want to leave so many, reserves of my savings with, financing these people? That's
Right.
the other way I think about it too.
Right. That's a good point there. And so, because it is the measuring stick in reference to other currencies, the emerging market currencies is tumbling. And I was reading through this, and it was saying the MSCI Emerging Market Index dropped for a second day, indicating this year slide of 4.4%, heading for the steepest annual drop since 2015. So you have all those nations around the world that have dollar-denominated debt. And as the dollar continues to increase, it puts more strain on their ability to be able to repay and sustain their debt loads. Therefore, their economies crumble even faster. So a stronger dollar basically
I'm not.
speeds up the global contagion in a sense.
I'm not.
Where, yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead. No,
I'm not too sure about that anymore,
okay.
because countries like Brazil and India, China,
The BRICS.
trying to move. Yeah, they could just say, well, we're not going to pay our dollar debts. We'll just
Yeah,
deal with Russia and China, just
yeah,
like, So does it really matter? And the thing is, up until recently, the Brazilian currency was doing really well,
yeah,
and I think the reason emerging market currencies are down a bit is because commodities have gone down so much. So I think it's a temporary thing,
okay.
and I think if anything, they're going to keep trying to move away from the dollar, because the U.S. is using it as a weapon.
Yeah. Now, okay, so here's another article headline I thought was worth mentioning. Global equity funds see a second weekly outflow on slowdown worries. And so this outflow, where are they flowing into? Are these people flowing into cash, for this fire sale that's coming? Or are they flowing into gold, metals rather, or mining space? Where do you think a lot of this outflow is heading to? Is it just being parked on the sideline and just for precautionary measures, or what? What would you think?
Probably, yeah, to pay bills and margin, because a lot of people are leveraged; they have to get out,
Yeah.
and probably cash as well, because there's very few asset classes that are up on the year, so
Yeah.
they could be going into short-term T-bills, treasuries
Yeah.
and stuff, maybe into physical gold, because we're hearing that the supply of physical, the stock at COMEX is actually being drained.
Yeah.
So maybe people are buying physical while the bankers sell the paper,
Yeah.
but it's difficult to say where it's going. But it's been a bad start to the year for all kinds of assets, and I don't think young people or even older people in the markets are familiar with this environment where both stocks and bonds are going down in value.
Yeah. And speaking of which, distressed markets or distressed assets, I can't help but not talk. I can't help but talk about the whole digital asset space, because that's under a lot of pressure. And I actually got an article here. I'll share it with you here. And I like to talk about how, there's, so much that's not being discussed in reference to the counterparties dealing with Bitcoin in particular, or just proof of work. So I got an article here talking about how the Bitcoin miners are under extreme. Let me get this article if I can find it. Give me 1 second. But how the Bitcoin miners are overly saturated with debt to where they're having to dump a lot of their coins because they can no longer sustain themselves.
I
So
guess they followed what's his name, Michael Saylor's advice. They mortgaged themselves up to the hilt to buy Bitcoin, and now that it's gone down, they've got problems. I mean, that's why leverage is such a dangerous thing. It's nice when it's going your way, but when it turns,
It can turn very violently the other way. So I'm trying to find. I got the article here, but I want to make sure it opens up. But anyway, so it says that Bitcoin miners are $4 billion. So almost 4 billion in Bitcoin mining loans are coming under stress. And so the concern is that a lot of miners have decided to unload some of their savings, which is predominantly in Bitcoin, putting more stress on the market.
Yeah.
And it's really exposing how interconnected the crypto market is in reference to all the financialization of products they've created.
Yeah.
And so you got Voyager file for bankruptcy. You got 3AC file for bankruptcy. You got BlockFi being bought or being given loans by. So you got all these big conglomerates now that are under heavy pressure due to the just confusion and all that digital product stuff. And it resembles to me the banking sector for the legacy system. Like there's so much stuff behind the scenes that's complicated we know nothing about, but it's all interconnected. And when one domino falls, they all are falling right now. And that's just in digital assets, dealing with Bitcoin and cryptos. Wait till it happens in the banking sector in the same format, because nobody knows what's going on behind the scenes. And I really think it's unraveling right now. We just haven't surfaced just yet, but it's coming, I think.
The other thing as well, you showed that article. Why have they been borrowing so much to get these projects started? And the reason I guess they're coming under stress now is because the Fed started raising rates and they're making money more credit more expensive. So that's affecting even the crypto space, the digital space,
right?
And it defeats that's the problem. Cryptos, digital currencies are supposed to be outside the system, but they're actually, I think Wall Street has also infiltrated the crypto space. So they've probably, people like Goldman and others have pushed these projects to borrow money from them. And now they're pulling the plug on the finance because rates are rising. And then it's creating a vicious circle. And of liquidation and more liquidation for margin calls, because you said that the miners borrowed 4 billion to mine Bitcoin.
Right, and just the cost to sustain the rigging operations, like you have to have miners that expire every year or two because of just more need for power, and calculations become more complicated to solve those problems, and so it's a never-ending energy drain. And so people try to sell it saying it's the most efficient use of energy in humankind because it's unmutable calculators, and the math. I'm like, dude, get out of here. The moment those rigs start cutting off, hash rate eventually will drop. And that's another biggest issue, is that because the price is at 20,000, some of those mining companies are not profitable because their energy costs is still high as heck. But then again,
and energy prices have gone up as well. Don't forget that they've gone, like in Europe, natural gas prices have gone up more than 10 times in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah. And let me acknowledge this here. Chris, appreciate you, man. Says if the Fed pivots and drops rates to zero, will interest rates fall back again for a 30-year? Will this continue to keep the housing market strong? Thanks. If the Fed pivots and drops rates to zero,
I think it will drop the yield on the 30-year, but not too much. I think the curve will stay very steep. It depends how far they can drive. They could drive CPI from around 9, where it is now, down to 4 or 5, and people might be happy with a 2%, 2.5% 30-year. Right now, it's about 3.2. So yeah, that could happen. I'm not too sure though that housing will do well, because I think basic necessities are still going to be very expensive, and we're going to still have a lot of inflation.
Right. And I said,
yeah.
And so, like, if the rates drop to zero, it's like, we're not far from there now. So I don't really see that being much of a difference maker in providing confidence for people. And also the other intangibles that, we're not talking about in reference to people having disposable income to be able to take on more debt. And on top of that, with the banks and the whole reverse repo situation, all that slush funds back there, are the banks, still lending as much as they were prior to, so like, will that come back? Because I don't think a lot of people are already tapped out. So who's going to really be out there looking to borrow in that way to where it would impact the entire housing market. So, but yet going to zero, it's like we're not too far from zero right now, technically
Well,
speaking.
I think the Fed funds is like
1.75.
1.75 to
Right.
2.
Right.
So I think the only way the 30-year will come down if we go back to zero in the Fed funds is if they manage to get the CPI back down to like 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
Then the markets are probably going to say, oh, they've killed inflation, so they're going to start buying the bonds. But I think that will be that will be a good trade from where we are right now. But eventually, I think yields are going to go a lot higher.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right, so let's get to some questions. Let's feel free to throw out some questions, and we'll share our 2 cents on it. Just highlight everything in the dollar to stand out. We'll jump on it and keep it moving. It says, let me see here. Let me know if you see anything, Mario, out there.
Oh yeah, we've got Dwayne Clark. He thinks that the 30-year yield will go through the roof, and he could be right, because even though they if they drove Fed funds to zero, you could have the bond market finally say, well, this is enough. They'll never be able to stop printing, and that will never be able to be paid off, which they can't really. And they'll finally realize that holding a 10-year or a 30-year is a bad proposition. And it could backfire. As I said, you could have a steep yield curve where you got 0% rate here for overnight, and then 4 or 5% for 30 years. And then the Fed would have a big problem there as well. I think, it's all very, they've manipulated everything so much. Prices are all screwed up.
Yeah.
That is really difficult to say even what will happen if they do that.
Yeah, very good point there. And let me see here.
There's a question here, I think.
Where are we at?
Where is it?
Question. It says, Barack Johnson seeks asylum in Ukraine.
Yeah. Vince Grant, when does the dollar get turned off? Well,
in phases.
Well, I'll let you cover that.
Yeah, no. So this goes back to your point earlier, and when I was referring to the emerging markets and how those currencies are failing right now, and you threw out the idea that Brazil, Russia, India, and China, all those nations that have an alternative, already set up. They just haven't fully announced it, I believe. So they already have something to address, the dollar's concern as far as it having been weaponized on the entire world throughout the last umpteen years. But I think it'll be in phases. Like they can't afford to just like literally hit that switch and say, from this moment on, no more dollars accepted for anything in reference to energy, whatever. We only take our currencies or nothing else. Then right there, that will be the dollar being turned off, because all the real resources come from the BRICS nations and their partners.
Yeah. The other thing as well, why do you have to borrow in dollars these days? You could borrow in rubles or in yuan, and you could start projects over there.
Right.
America doesn't really manufacture anything anymore.
Right.
So why do you have to borrow in dollars? So
correct.
Yeah.
So the use of dollars at this current moment is only if those nations that took out large amounts of debt want to maintain their debts and want to stay in a SWIFT system where they'll have access to the banking structure and things of that nature, dominated from the Western side, then they'll play along with it. But the moment they have alternatives, such as an alternative to the SWIFT system, as well as an alternative currency to use with that, then they can say to hell with the U.S. We'll kiss your debt goodbye, and then we'll deal with that anyway. But so I think it'll be in phases anyway. So, but we all know that at this current moment, it's not a part of the future that the BRICS have in play, as far as the dollar being a focal point of what they're doing. So that gives us we have more than enough warnings already in play right now.
Beverly,
it says what is the way forward for Japan, Sri Lanka, UK, Pakistan, Lebanon, Europe, and the US? What is the way forward? In what reference? What way forward? Monetarily speaking, geopolitically speaking, because you threw the US in there and Europe in there. If it was just Sri Lanka and Pakistan and Lebanon, they got a whole other can of worms to deal with. Then
Well, I think maybe she's referencing the hyperinflation and the protests in Sri
Mhm.
Lanka and the hyperinflation in Lebanon. I mean, the way forward is very difficult and tough. It's like to rein in your spending,
Mhm.
cut the size of government, go go to a more balanced economy where there's less credit and spending, but more sound money and investment and production. I think that's the only way forward.
Mhm.
Any other gimmicky projects like Boris Johnson used to have, he kept changing week to week. He said, "Oh, we're going to become global Britain, or we're going to become a high wage economy,"
Mhm.
and he kept changing. He didn't have a unfortunately, the general public wants something now, but unfortunately, we need to sort things out for the long term. And
Mhm.
politicians, they don't think long term because they're thinking of the next election in
Right.
2 or 4 years.
Right. They have very short term thinking because they literally want to just do their job and so hopefully get renominated again. Here's something that says thoughts on the Chinese companies no longer allowed to pay employees in tether. And so, other than just, I saw that, but didn't look into it. But I haven't really focused much on what's happening within China, knowing that they're having issues. And when it comes to tether, being utilized as a payment utensil, I wonder what brought about this. Because assuming more people wanted to have access to dollars rather than the yuan, so this is probably why they did that. But any thoughts on just this title alone, Mario?
Well, maybe the Chinese know the truth about Tether, that it's a Ponzi scheme.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that could definitely be an option. Employers need to use USDT. So yeah, that's something I'll dive into further. Ah man, it's more stories out here than anybody got time to look at. What else we got here? Invest in rubles. I mean gold. What else we got? Feel free to throw out
Well,
thoughts.
I think also if you want to have exposure to the ruble, you
Mhm.
can do it through buying anything related to crude oil, because we've seen recently with the drop in crude oil that the ruble's actually gone down a little bit. So
Mhm.
that's just an opinion. It's not financial advice.
Right. Let me see here. Let me see. Not many questions. Here's one. What does it says? When will inflation cause the real money to lose value in such a way that QT happens by default and cause liquidation issue?
Well,
Okay.
inflation is the increase of currency and credit. It's a
Hmm.
and it dilutes all the other currency that are in existence, and
Hmm.
that's happening already. That's why
Right.
prices are rising. It's already happening, and it's going to keep happening for I think quite a few years to come.
Yeah. And definitely with the quantitative tightening experiment underway now, that's why we're witnessing so much downward trajectory of markets because we need continuous currency to keep those things
Yeah,
propped up. So if they don't pivot the way everybody
and
anticipates they do, then what? It's just more
And the
bad
other
news.
thing as well, when you raise rates, when you're doing quantitative tightening, because that's what quantitative tightening is, you're selling bonds,
Hmm.
yields go up, mortgage rates go up. It raises all the factors that go into calculating the cost of living. So
Mm.
it makes the cost of living even worse instead of bringing down. And that's why you said earlier that we're going to have hyper stagflation
Hmm.
or hyper stag deflation. I forgot the term, where everything that you need to survive on goes up in value, but
Hmm.
the things that you don't need, like luxury goods or um, stocks and
iPhones
bonds,
and
yeah, that's
all that
going to go
extra stuff.
down.
Yeah, they're gonna make because it's gonna be hard. People not gonna be consuming as much, especially living in a land of abundance where we have access to everything in real time
Mm.
by just simply financing it. So here's something I did not know. I just looked it up real quick. Said, did you know that Boris Johnson's dad worked at the World Bank?
Yeah,
So
Boris
I just looked
Johnson
it up.
was yeah, his dad was worked at a lot of international institutions, and I think Boris Johnson was born in New York
Hmm.
because his dad was working there at the time.
Yeah. So it says here, former employee of the World Bank and the European Commission. So they keep it in the family. They keep criminality in the family. Man, all those guys know what's really going on. What else we got here? Let me see here. Inflation real up. So let's RT, is it possible? Is it possible post-economic collapse that the new system could be ordered around CERN, quantum technology infrastructure, already global government efforts involved? I
don't know much about CERN.
So I
the quantum technology infrastructure is going way above my pay grade, I think.
So just my 2 cents on that question. On the surface, is knowing that CERN has to do with that dark matter. They just discovered 3 elements of dark matter just this past week by cutting that device on, and knowing that quantum computer and AI, robotics, artificial intelligence, all that is a part of the future they want to create for us. I think that whatever the final outcome of all the stuff we're talking about, what it looks like, it will be very computer-centric. Robotics and automation will be the prevailing technologies used. Humanity will be of no use, as they've already told us, and the population, as a result, will be subject to the dictators that run the computers and can write the computer code. That's what I think will happen at the end of the day.
There's an interesting comment from Michael Kennedy, if you want to bring that up.
Michael Kennedy, where we at? Michael Kennedy, I see. So, okay, yeah. Putin has information on Boris regarding KGB spy who is now a lord, and that's why he's going.
It could be true. Who knows?
Yeah. I also saw something earlier saying that Russia or Putin or something in reference to Russia about releasing the 9/11 video footage or something like that to show things in real time, how it really went down. Because definitely, I'm sure they have that. So if that was to come out, that'd be a definite shakeup. And that's what we can probably expect some type of event to occur to distract us. Why does everyone accept the Fed to pivot?
Expect, I think he means.
Yeah. That's what I think we're going to find out, because it seems conventional. It just seems practical that they want to save things.
Yeah, because we are in a credit-based system, a fiat currency-based system that always needs more and more debt to keep going. And if you allow the debt to collapse, then the whole economy will, and the stock market could go to zero, technically. And then, and historically, they've always, if they want to stay in charge, they'll have to pump the presses, start the printing presses again. That's why people expect them to pivot. Some people maybe, Mike, you think sometimes that they could let everything collapse. And even if they did, there would be a lot of bankruptcy. So anyone who's got any debt, any kind of mortgage, they would be in deep trouble. And that's why I think it's always important never to be a borrower and a lender as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because lenders are going to lose out as well, because they're on the other side of the debt.
Very true. And what came to mind is just talking about the derivatives and all that other stuff. So I'm gonna put up the Extras pyramid. And so just like this pyramid here, this is the illusion that they've been able to pull over on the world for so long, and distracting us from having real tangible wealth that was actually property. Like having gold, silver coins in your hands was yours, that you would take to get, minted or coined. But then again, that was a much different system. Now we're heading towards computerization and derivatives. I'm wondering, with 2 trillion or whatever, 2 quadrillion or whatever it is, how do they unravel? How does that unravel? Because that's all denominated in dollar terms. What are you going to do with that? Like, how do they transition that into this digital future? Will this be a part of the tokenization of real world assets or what? So this is the confusion that I'm like, man, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But we know that, as Dwayne mentioned, they want us to own nothing and be happy with it. So that's what everything they're trying to execute is working towards, however that plays out. All right, so we are about 40 minutes or so. As always, let's get ready to dial down. I don't see a lot of questions, a lot of good thoughts out there, though. So, Mario, if you don't see nothing out there question-wise, we can just get ready to dial back and get ready for another exciting weekend.
Yeah.
But anyway, so as always, for those tuned in, appreciate you for hanging out with us. Next week, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fireworks as well. So definitely going to be lots of stuff to talk about. Anything coming up on this weekend or next week, Mario, that you keep an eye on that we should all pay attention to, and sign us off with some good news if you got some.
Good news. Yeah, I mean, I think people are waking up a lot more to what's going on in the world. So that's good news. And there seems to be a lot of things happening.
Yeah.
Like in Japan. I'm not saying that's a good thing what happened there, but also, in Europe, people seem to be waking up, the farmers. But I'm sure the powers that be are going to keep trying to bring in new crises to try to scare people. But the good thing is that I think they're losing credibility.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Right.
And when people lose credibility, like Boris Johnson did, and how Joe Biden, he doesn't have any credibility with a big chunk of the population, then, people will lose faith and confidence in the currency that they manage. And the same thing goes for the Fed and the central banks. They're losing credibility. They're trying desperately to say, oh, we're fighting inflation now, like Volcker, but they'll never be able to do it like Volcker, because Volcker wasn't facing debt to GDP of 130%. It was 30% of debt to GDP. So that's the positive that I see out there, people waking up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I just thought about this. So we have the G7 nations that met. So we got one down. We got a lot more to go. And right now, I think the Italian protests, I'm seeing people talking about Draghi. He has to go.
Oh, yeah, that too, yeah.
So, we can knock these guys out one by one, just get them out of power. And unfortunately, they're going to have their predecessors ready to roll right up in there. But if we can get some fresh blood up in there, some people who really, think like we think, actually worked in the real world and actually done something productive for humanity other than just, being passed down through bloodlines and, lifelong politicians of corruption. We can get some new people in there, then there's hope. But other than that, one down and a couple more to go. So far, I think so far so good.
Okay.
But anyway, people, as always, enjoy your weekend. Be blessed, be safe, and back at it next week, same time, same place. See you guys later. Peace.